And on the line with me right now is Alderman Ray Lopez. He's the alderman in Chicago for the 15th Ward. He was first elected in 2012. He's been an outspoken critic of progressive Democrat policies and has frequently appeared on Fox News as a common-sense Democrat. Most recently, he opposed the Gaza ceasefire resolution presented to the Chicago City Council, saying that we can talk about a ceasefire when the hostages are returned. Sounds like common sense to me. He also supports abolishing the city's sanctuary status. He joins me tonight to discuss the Ed Burke sentencing, the new tax proposals, and crime. But first, I can't help but ask him, what does he think the Democrats should do about Biden? Ray, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Jeannie, happy Sunday to you and to your listeners. You know, I think the Democratic Party on the national level has a serious problem with their president, our president, Joe Biden, as the candidate. Clearly, he is having some issues. He's having some decline that we don't want to recognize or talk about. And I've heard it from a number of hosts who said that if you feel that Donald Trump is the threat to democracy that you're going to make in the campaign, you need to have a stronger candidate who can articulate that and match Donald Trump word for word, wit for wit on the debate stage, in front of the voters and on the street. And I don't think Joe Biden has it in him to do that.
No, it was very sad. And quite frankly, I mean, it's a little frightening.
Painful.
You know, he has an awesome and big job. I mean, it's you have to be up to doing that job. And so I got to tell you, Ray, I feel like somebody's been pulling the strings for a while now, though.
Well, I think that much is clear. And I think that when you are the chief executive of the most powerful country in the world, we want to know that you're the one in charge, not some conspiracy shadow government in the background looming, not Joe Biden, not the team of the co-governance team that's there. I want to know that Joe Biden is commander in chief, not just sitting in the chair. And I think that we see that, yes, he may have the background on a lot of the policy, but do I feel that 100% confident, especially after the debate performance, that he's the one in charge? No, I do not. I think that what we have is a situation like we saw with Woodrow Wilson, where he had a stroke that incapacitated him in his term. And rather than go through what the Constitution allows for succession, the First Lady picked up the mantle and ran with it. Unlike then, we live in a 24-hour news cycle where you have video everywhere, you have social media everywhere, constantly showing who's really pulling the strings. And I think that the other partner that is complicit in all of this is the standard mainstream media, which has not wanted to push this button, ask those questions, and have helped cover this up for some time. And I would almost be willing to venture that they chose CNN on purpose so that they could have a friendly audience and response team on hand to help brace the Democratic public for the switch that's going to happen inevitably come the Democratic National Convention.
Well, you know, I sit on the other side of the aisle, and so, I mean, we're going to disagree probably about the general election, but let's be honest here. The Democrats did themselves no favor by letting it get this far down the road. So, I mean, we're looking now at Chicago. 2024 could be a very historic election or DNC.
Well, something's going to have to happen from now until August. Because, as you know, in order for Joe Biden to get on all of the state's ballots, the Democratic Party had to do a Zoom convention where all the delegates already voted. So really, the convention in Chicago was just going to be like a formality, a big party, you know, originally as planned. But I think you're right. Now, if Joe Biden were to say before the convention that he's not going to be in the race and releases his delegates to vote according to whomever they want, you're going to see one of those bare-knuckle brawls to become the next presidential nominee for the Democratic Party here in the city of Chicago.
So it's funny because we could be going right back into the 1800s where you've had bare-knuckle brawls and, like, you know, third and fifth ballots to determine who the nominee is going to be. This is not unusual. It's only unusual in modern-day politics.
Yes, I don't think any one particular candidate has a lock on it. I think everyone's going to be angling. I know that, you know, this has kind of been in the political calculus for our governor, J.B. Pritzker, who basically fronted the cash to pay for the DNC being here. I'm sure he wanted a home court advantage so that should something happen, that he could step right in. But we know Gavin Newsom is working hard to try and, impress like some air of inevitability from the California state. But really, I think you need some moderate Democrats to kind of stand in the middle and remind people of what our values are, and not the extreme partisan values that seem to be espoused by so many in some of these deep blue states who don't have any check to their reins.
Well, you heard it from here. You heard it first here. If J.B. Pritzker gets a nomination and somebody's got to take over the governorship, it should be somebody like you, Ray. All right. Okay, but let's turn to Ed Burke. He's amassed a great deal of power as the longest-serving member of the city council and the head of the finance committee. He had many people write letters to the court attesting to his good works and asking for leniency. What do you say about all that?
There are many people who've had many issues with the 2-year, $2 million sentence that was issued by the judge. Some believe compassion is warranted, that he didn't deserve to die in jail. Others believe he should have been sent to Alcatraz. I get it. People have all kinds of emotions, particularly when it comes to Ed Burke. But what I find particularly egregious, Jeannie, is the fact that regardless of the sentencing of Ed, the fact of the matter remains that we still allow outside employment of Chicago aldermen, and that was what the center of this case was about, a sitting alderman trying to steer business to his side job. 5 years ago, I introduced an ordinance to end the outside employment of aldermen, to make a Chicago alderman be a full-time job that they only do. They get paid well enough for it. They should focus on it. And city council still has not been able to muster the political will to put an end to outside employment, which is just going to continue to provide opportunities for this type of activity in the future. If sentences are supposed to dissuade people from engaging in the activities, why do we still keep the door open to allow for that kind of temptation on the books right now? I think it's shameful that city council refuses to take this up. I think for as many progressives that claim to be about good government on city council, none of them want to reform city council or city hall. And it's a missed opportunity that will only allow for someone else down the road to do the exact same thing. And we'll be discussing when the 11th alderman goes to jail next.
Well, certainly when you're the third largest city like Chicago is, there's a myriad of businesses that touch your regulatory control. And so it'd be very, very difficult to say, well, these businesses you can do, these businesses you can't. So even if you were to say, like, you take the most egregious ones, like you can't do property tax work, that would make sense, right? You can't be a lobbyist. Well, that makes sense too, right? There's some things that where obviously you should not be involved in, but again, it would be that would be a narrow window, needle to thread in what could and could not be. Like I always like to say, you know what? You can write the strongest ethics law. It really just matters that the person that you elected is ethical, and that's really 100%. The bottom line there.
100%. And actually, one of my 15th Ward predecessors went to jail, Virgil Jones, in Operation Silver Shovel. And when I first ran for office, I asked him, why do so many aldermen wind up going to jail or committing crimes or being involved in corruption? And he actually gave me a very simple truth. He said, because they all think they're smarter than the last one that went to jail.
Yeah, well, you know what? If it wouldn't be because of the Cook County prosecutor, but it's because the federal prosecutors are the ones putting our corrupt politicians in jail. So at least we have that going for us. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So apparently we are once again, we've got your fellow alderpersons requesting a number of new taxes, apparently even up to 16 different proposals, according to Chicago Alderman William Hall. I mean, wants a congestion tax, a monthly wireless tax plan, a city sticker, a vacant lot tax, a gaming tax. I mean, it goes on and on. I don't think that he missed a single tax in this laundry list of taxes. Oh, here's a good one. He wants to tax big rigs moving through residential neighborhoods. Oh, okay. Wow. I mean, it's just incredible. Is that the answer? Does Chicago need more taxes? Is that going to solve what ails it?
Well, we missed the breathing tax and the per toilet paper slice tax that also didn't make the cut, but I'm sure they're coming in round two. But no, I mean, that is not the answer. You know, we have as much a spending problem as we have a revenue problem. But the first thing that we can control, spending. And we have seen since my time in office, when my first budget was $8 billion for the city of Chicago. We are now at $16 billion for Chicago's budget. And that's separate from the Board of Education's $10 billion that we take from property owners. We need to do a complete forensic audit, top to bottom, of our budget, find out what we're spending, where it's going, how it's being used, what are the service outcomes that we're providing, and seeing how we can make that more efficient before we ask for more money. Additionally, the other thing that we have to remember is when we talk about immigration, it's been a hot topic under this administration. We talk about how you fund the asylum seekers. And don't forget that the mayor announced that, we have an annual surplus of money unspent of about $1 billion a year in our budget, which means all the money that city council allocates, our departments are not spending fully. They're, leaving $1 billion on the table every year, which the mayor and mayors before him put off to the side and uses their own little hidden slush fund. But that tells me that you are asking $1 billion more from taxpayers than you need. Close that gap.
Well,
Start there.
Well, I mean, especially when it comes to property taxes. I mean, there's been Pappas is out there saying, look, you can expect about a 20% rise in your property tax bill in Cook County, and the south suburbs are getting demolished.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. I think Dixmoor is 122% increase in their property taxes. They're getting crucified. It's awful.
And I think that's on the low end, because I think most of those increases have been closer to 300% increase, 3 times what they were last cycle for their assessments.
Well, let's look at immigration really quickly. Apparently, there's going to be additional taxpayer-supported shelters that are set to serve migrants. And is your ward going to be subject to one of these shelters?
No, my ward, thankfully, is not in the shelter business anymore. We had Gage Park. We closed Gage Park.
I thought that was the case. Yep.
But my understanding now that we have a shelter going up at an old hotel on the southwest side near Ford City Mall, if your listeners are familiar, by 73rd and Cicero, about 2 miles south of Midway Airport, courtesy of the state of Illinois. And I think this also goes back to our presidential problem. We can't pretend like this has gone away. We can't keep allowing the federal government to walk away from its responsibility, its duty, and address this issue. If you want to have granted them asylum and give them respite while they wait for their case, fine. Then the federal government needs to step up and foot this bill, or start adjudicating these claims and determining whether or not people have grounds for asylum and deport those that don't. It's really simple, and it saves us a lot of money. But yet that's not the politics of my party right now, and especially with recent Supreme Court decisions that say you can no longer separate families. What's going to happen to these migrant asylum seekers, who in waiting for 8 years for their case to be heard, start having children?
Right.
They will be by default granted immunity to stay here because the Supreme Court has already ruled that.
Yeah.
And I'm as much for having people come to this country that want to add to the positive fabric of our society. I believe you need immigrants to be able to come here. But until the front door is fixed, we shouldn't pride ourselves on propping open the back door and hiding behind all of these technicalities to do what we know we should be doing right now.
No, because you also have a crime problem. Look, the cartels run the drug trade in Chicago. Everybody knows it. You have 50 supposedly ISIS terrorists that have come across the cartels, siphoned across somewhere loose in America. They don't know where they are. I mean, where do you think they're going to go? They're coming to major metropolitan cities to do as much damage as they possibly can. And we've got a crime problem.
They are in Chicago. They're in my ward because we have Venezuelan gangs now fighting with Chicago's homegrown Mexican gang. It's only going to get exponentially worse the more desperate they get and the more opportunity that we give them by turning a blind eye to the truth of the nature.
Okay, we've got to leave it right there. This is Ray Lopez, Alderman, 5th Ward. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Take care.